All right, folks, we have already taken the wheel off, as you might can see over there on the ground. And I forgot to set up the camera. That's my fault. Today is one of them days. Anywho, what we're going to do is put double lock nut this stud, and this stud, we're going to back these studs out so we can install this Bro-tek 3-inch spacer. And it's fairly simple, cut and dry. Just need to be careful and take your safety precautions. I saved the two nuts that came off of here. We're going to double them up on one stud. Take the other one, put it behind it, line these up. This is kind of tips and tricks. Line these two up so they're parallel with each other. And I have a 22 millimeter flexible wrench. I'm going to slip over the first nut and go back over to the second nut. So this first nut, go ahead and finger tighten it up against the second nut, and you can start backing this out. This stud is coming out every flex of the wrench. It's fairly long-winded, but not too bad. Again, this is a 22 millimeter wrench. You can also use a socket if you can get this nut tightened up against this stud to give you some leverage. Pop that loose and out she comes. I have a second wrench I'm going to put up here for backup. I hope this is showing up on camera. I don't know. Wow, ain't that awesome? You drop it on the ground and try again. My hands don't work like they used to. Maybe y'all had that problem. If you don't have this problem, that's great. Continue to drop them on the ground for good measure and set this stud to the side. You may want to keep up with these original parts. So we do the same thing with the other stud. It's pretty simple. Get my fingers to work right. Thread that on there about far as you can go. Just put your other one on there. Finger tighten it up against there. Line them up again like this. Put the wrench on backwards and try it again. And there she goes. And out she comes. Now this time I'm going to be a little smarter than my equipment. I didn't really want that other stud coming out before I was ready. And obviously I was not ready. That tightened up on me again. No big deal. Put the wrench on it. And voila. off she is. Want to make sure the face of this hub is no dirt, trash, wasp nests, spider webs, gunk and pucky, what have you. It's sitting on the face of this hub, which it shouldn't be, because that's where the wheel just came from. That's all clean and flat. So the next step is to put the hub on, and I'll be right back. All right, the next step is to put the spacer on. Line it up. Now we're going to dry fit 2 lug nuts or spacer nuts to hold it in place, one at the top, one at the bottom, just to hold it in place while we get ready to put thread locker. We use blue thread locker on these studs. And while we're doing this, when we get all these in here, we're going to torque them to 70 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern, in a crosshatch pattern, up, down, left, right, upper right, lower left, etc. to 70 foot-pounds. That's half of the final torque specification of 140 foot-pounds. So we're going to hand thread these studs in here with some blue thread locker on them. Pretty much finger tight where it bottoms out. We're just putting these in hand tight where the taper matches the other taper inside the spacer hub, and then we'll torque them. I'll speed this process up a little bit. Hand feed it in there and hand torque it down till the two tapers meet. It's a fairly simple operation. Just if you're doing it by yourself, it'd probably take 30-40 minutes per spacer. My son-in-law is here with me, being an excellent help. And we did the other one in about 25 minutes last night. put some right there. All right, I'm going to set this torque wrench to 70 foot-pounds, and that's exactly where my son-in-law put it. We're going to start with this bad boy right here. Click, clickety click. Doing this in a crisscross fashion so you get equal amounts of torque across the face. That's very important that you use this crisscross pattern to get that torque even across the face of what you're working with, or you're going to have problems later down the road. You can have too much pressure on one side. Now we're going to 140 foot-pounds. It's hot out of here, folks. You hear me breathing hard. Plus I'm old and fat. That don't help nothing. And 40 foot-pounds. Drop it in the dirt just for good measure. Add a little salt and pepper to it. We do this again. Same way, different time. You can kind of hear that acoustical ting. That's because it's getting tight. Now we're going to test every one of them just to make sure everything's clickety clacking right along. And that's the end of that. Let's scoop this bottom in. Right there. Let's see what we got here. We're going to pivot it like this. All right, let's set it up there. I got it. Let's get some lug nuts on there to hold this bad boy on there. We're just dry fitting some lug nuts up there to hold this wheel on till we can get it snugged up. And I'm gonna reposition the camera. All right, I'm using this impact wrench just to snug up this wheel up against this hub so I can get my space even all the way around this spacer. Right now it's leaning out from the top and in at the bottom. So I'm just gonna snug this up. And now this wheel is fully seated up against this spacer with the same amount of distance and the gap all the way around. The next step is we're going to put blue Loctite, blue thread locker on these threads and run the lug nut up until it up against the face of this wheel and stop. Then we'll torque each one down. And these lug nuts have a lock washer, and these lug nuts are a dual purpose. They have a flat side and a taper side, and the taper side goes out because the wheel facing is flat. And continue doing this till we get all 6 of them on there, of course. I'm gonna back these up. I don't need that no more anyway right now. Come on, buddy, come off of there. Okay, got all the lug nuts and the lock washers on there, and now we're going to go around and pre-torque them to 70 foot-pounds. All right, we got the torque wrench set 70 foot-pounds. I'm going to crisscross just like we did on the spacer. I know some of you were saying, why is he using an extension? Well, it's because I have to. There's no other way to get this torque wrench handle up against this tire and into that hub without hitting this before I reach the deal. So that's the reason why. I really figure if we can get fairly close to 140 foot-pounds on the final torque, that should be great. Without a lot of whining and crying and boo-hooing. Really no other way to get to it in there. It's just such a deep wheel well. Sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Now we're going to the 140 pounds, 140 foot-pounds. Take this off so I can get a better swing on this dude. Oh, wow, that was a calibrated turn right there, I guarantee. There we go. Now we're going to 140 foot-pounds all the way around with a crisscross pattern. We'll start with this one down here. And over here. All right, we're going to check each one again just for good measure. Hit it till it clicks. And that, ladies and germs, takes care of a 3-inch Bro-tek tractor wheel spacer installation. As I said before, it's pretty cut and dry. It's real simple. Get your tractor barely off the ground. It'll help you out, especially if you have loaded tires. Just get it up off the ground enough where you can wiggle your wheel off once you get it all unfastened. And to make sure your hub face is clean before putting the spacer on. Then line up your spacer, dry fit 2 studs in it so the face is flat up against the hub, and then you can continue to put the studs in there with blue thread locker and torque them down to 70 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern, and then come back and change your torque wrench to 140 foot-pounds, and then another crisscross pattern, and that takes care of the spacer installation itself. Then put your wheel on and do the same thing with the lugs, but be sure you put your locking washers on first, and the flat side of the lug nuts facing the wheel and the tapered side facing outward. Put them all on, torque them down to 70 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern, and then come back again at 140 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern and tighten them up. And be sure to put blue thread locker on your wheel studs. And now we're able to finish this project. One thing I failed to mention while we were doing the installation was, why did we put 3-inch spacers on my tractor? Well, the number one reason is safety. My tractor is now much safer than it was before on inclines, embankments, and with heavy loads in the loader on uneven ground. What this does is give much more stability to the rear axle and the tractor overall. We just extended the width of my tractor, my TYM T474, 6 inches overall, 3 inches per side, of course. But the TYM T474 is a wonderful machine. It's an excellent tractor for all kinds of things. I'm just tickled to death with my tractor. The only complaint I have with it is what we just solved, and that was stability on the rear end. If I'm correct, I believe the rear width is 64 inches overall before as a factory setup, and we just added 6 inches overall. So I can already tell a difference. You can just look at it and it looks more stable, but researching this before I pulled the trigger on buying the spacers showed me that it's much more stable. And I had a little precarious situation on our deer lease last week where it felt really tippy in one situation, and that's not the first time, but I've been able to overcome that in the past and just be real careful like everyone else should be. But that particular situation was the last straw, and I went ahead and pulled the trigger and bought the spacers from Bro-tek in Canada, New Brunswick, Canada, I believe. And that transaction went very well. I bought it, it shipped the next morning, and 8 days later, which was yesterday, they arrived on my front porch in South Arkansas. So from Canada through customs, clearance, and come through New York, Maryland, and on down the line to Southern Arkansas in 8 days, that's pretty fast today, especially today with everything haywire the way it is. But that's the number one reason why we put spacers on my T474, is to give it more stability, to make it safer, and to give it a wider stance and a better platform to stand on. I hope you enjoyed the video. Maybe this helped out somebody who was thinking about adding spacers to their tractor. It's not hard, as you can see. Just take your time if you end up buying spacers. I highly recommend Bro-tek. They very well machined 6061 T6 aluminum billet, and they were CNC, excellent looking and heavy duty spacers. That's all I got. Y'all have a good day.